What if I told you that some of the food we eat every day is largely responsible for the worldwide explosion of cancer and some of the most chronic diseases of our time? And what if you heard that acid-forming foods are addictive, yet added to your diet in more ways than you can ever imagine? Would you think that is just a lot of nonsense? Coming up in today's episode.
The pH of the human body is important because at different pHs, diseases grow. And at different pHs, it's very hard for disease to grow. 2.6. This is where Coca-Cola sits. It's a killer. It's toxic. If blood pH does go up to 8, that person will go into a coma and die of alkalosis. If blood pH drops down to 7.22, that person will go into a coma and die of acidosis. Cancer loves acid. Cancer also loves no oxygen. The two most common symptoms of a gluten intolerance is brain fog and bloating.
I went on a journey to understand how we can protect ourselves from cancer. And what I discovered about the foods we eat daily left me shocked and determined to spread the word. In this video, Barbara, a renowned health teacher, will discuss the acid-forming foods we should avoid to provide a healthy environment for our body to protect against cancer naturally. Let's quickly discuss why we should always maintain a healthy pH balance in our bodies. Grab a glass of water with a slice of lemon. You'll see why soon.
I'm going to come at what is the best food to eat from the pH balance. pH means potential hydrogen. It's the acid-alkaline balance. So up one end, we have acid, and up the other end of the acid-alkaline scale, we have alkaline. And in the middle, we've got neutral. Neutral is neither acid nor alkaline. So the acid scale, it's 0, alkaline, it's 14, and in the middle, 7 is neutral. Blood has a reading on the pH scale, and blood's reading on the pH scale is between 7.35 and 7.4. It will always be within that range.
Maintaining the body's blood pH at a neutral level, typically around 7.4, is crucial for several reasons. 1. Enzyme function. Enzymes, which are proteins that catalyze biochemical reactions, operate optimally at specific pH levels. A neutral blood pH ensures that enzymes function efficiently, supporting vital bodily processes. 2. Oxygen transport. Hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen, binds and releases oxygen most effectively at a neutral pH. Deviations in pH can impair oxygen delivery to tissues. 3. Electrolyte balance. Blood pH influences the balance of electrolytes such as potassium, sodium and calcium, which are essential for nerve function, muscle contraction and heart rhythm. 4. Metabolic processes. Many metabolic reactions produce acidic or basic byproducts. The body needs to neutralize these to maintain pH balance, which is critical for metabolic stability. 5. Cell integrity. Cells and tissues can be damaged by significant deviations in pH. Maintaining a neutral pH helps protect cellular structures and function. 6. Immune function. A stable pH supports the optimal function of the immune system, helping the body defend against pathogens.
If blood pH does go up to 8, that person will go into a coma and die of alkalosis. If blood pH drops down to 7.22, that person will go into a coma and die of acidosis. So there cannot be much variation there, and we don't need to worry about the pH of our blood, because there are two organs that are constantly keeping it within that range.
The body has several mechanisms to maintain pH balance, including the bicarbonate buffer system, respiratory regulation, exhaling carbon dioxide, and renal regulation, excreting or conserving bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. These systems work together to keep blood pH within a narrow, optimal range.
One is your lungs, and this explains why you start breathing very deeply when you exercise. We don't choose to breathe deeply, do we? But when we're getting to the top of that hill, you're starting to breathe very deeply, especially if you run up the hill. Well, why does that happen? Well, the cells need more oxygen. Remember, more oxygen gives you a better delivery of fuel. Plus, as the oxygen and the glucose are being burnt, they're giving off carbon dioxide, and that has to be got rid of. Because if it doesn't, the carbon dioxide builds up in the blood, and that creates a more acid environment. So that is why we start breathing deeply. So deep breathing helps to keep the balance of the pH in the blood as it should be. The other organ is your kidneys. Your kidneys do this in a fascinating way. So why am I talking about the kidneys with pH? Let's say the pH of the blood is getting too acid. Well, it's in this area of the blood going through the tubules that the pH is tested. You see, we only filter out 1.5 litres of urine a day, but out of these filtering units, 1,800 litres is filtered out. So where does that go? There's a reabsorption here. And it's in the reabsorption area that pH is being monitored. So let's say the pH of the blood is getting too acid, and we'll look at why that is in a moment. Then extra acid is dropped into the tubules to be urinated out. But let's say the pH of the blood is going too alkaline. Well, it is here that extra acid is pulled back out of the tubules and into the blood. So that is how the kidneys are constantly monitoring and balancing, if necessary, the pH of the blood.
The human body filters and produces approximately 1 to 2 litres of urine daily. According to medical research, the kidneys play a crucial role in this process, filtering about 180 litres of blood daily to remove waste products and excess substances, which are then excreted as urine. This amount can vary based on factors such as fluid intake, diet, physical activity, and overall health. Studies published in medical journals such as the American Journal of Physiology Renal Physiology support these findings, highlighting the kidney's essential function in maintaining body homeostasis through urine production.
So you can see that the kidneys not only filter the blood, they play an important role in what's called homeostasis, in balancing the body, in balancing the pH, in balancing the sodium and water balance in the body, in balancing blood pressure. The pH of the human body is important because at different pHs, diseases grow. And at different pHs, it's very hard for disease to grow. So let's have a look at that. 2.6. This is where Coca-Cola sits. It's a killer. It's toxic.
Now that we have discussed the importance of maintaining a balanced pH in our bodies, let's examine the conditions that are conducive to cancer growth.
Cancer loves acid. Cancer also loves no oxygen. So knowing those things, it makes a lot of sense to alkalize the tissues. And even though there's the drop of only 1 point, the drop of 1 point means 60% less oxygen available at the cellular level. The other thing cancer loves is sugar. So these are the 3 common denominators I find.
Cancer cells thrive in environments with high sugar levels, low oxygen, and acidity due to several well-documented reasons. Sugar. Cancer cells have increased energy needs due to rapid growth and division. They rely heavily on glucose for energy through glycolysis, a process less efficient than oxidative phosphorylation, but faster. This phenomenon is known as the Warburg effect, named after Otto Warburg, who first observed that cancer cells favor glycolysis even in the presence of oxygen. Lack of oxygen. Tumors often experience hypoxia due to inadequate blood supply. Cancer cells adapt by activating hypoxia-inducible factors, HIFs, which promote survival, angiogenesis, and a metabolic shift toward glycolysis. These adaptations help cancer cells survive and proliferate under low oxygen conditions. Hypoxic conditions. can make cancer cells more resistant to apoptosis, allowing them to persist and multiply despite unfavorable conditions. Acidic environment. The glycolytic pathway favored by cancer cells produces lactic acid, contributing to an acidic microenvironment. This acidity aids in the degradation of the extracellular matrix, facilitating tumor invasion and metastasis. An acidic environment can inhibit immune cell function, helping cancer cells evade immune detection and destruction. While normal cells struggle in acidic conditions, cancer cells often thrive, gaining a competitive advantage over healthy cells. These conditions create a microenvironment that supports the aggressive growth and spread of cancer cells, as documented in numerous medical studies and journals worldwide.
And so when people come to us wanting help to conquer cancer, you see what we do? We suggest a diet that's highly alkalizing. We suggest ways to oxygenate the body. In fact, some health retreats have hyperbaric chambers. Have you heard of those? Puts oxygen in under pressure. And we also greatly eliminate the glucose, the sugars going into the body.
Conquering cancer involves prevention through a healthy lifestyle, vaccinations, and regular screenings. Early detection with self-exams and professional screenings is crucial. Effective treatment requires specialist care, personalized plans, and adherence to medical regimens. Supportive care includes mental health support, pain management, and maintaining nutrition and physical activity. Staying informed about your condition and treatment options, seeking second opinions, and connecting with support networks are essential. Utilizing family, friends, and patient advocacy groups for support enhances the ability to manage and overcome cancer, improving outcomes and quality of life.
What I'd like to look at now is what foods have an acid effect and what foods have an alkaline effect. And this will enable you to ensure that you're having a more alkaline diet.
Let's discuss acid-forming foods and how they enable cancer cell growth. A friendly reminder, kindly like this video and subscribe to support this channel. Also, don't forget to watch the cancer healing tips in the last part of this video.
These acid-forming foods are high in the acid-forming minerals, which is phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine. So what foods are high in phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine? Meat. This explains why Dr. Colin Campbell found he could turn cancer cells on and off like a switch by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving the rats.
So we see that red meat and processed meat are a silent acid bomb. That juicy steak might taste great, but it's highly acidic. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that high-protein diets, especially from animal sources, increase the body's acid load. Dr. T. Colin Campbell's groundbreaking research, detailed in the China study, showed he could turn cancer growth on and off in rats simply by adjusting their intake of animal protein. It's mind-blowing stuff, folks. Food number 2 on our list is wheat. The wheat consumed today is not your grandma's grain anymore. It is a far cry from what our ancestors consumed. Modern wheat has been heavily hybridized, creating a much more complex gluten structure.
The hybridized wheat, the hybridization of the wheat created a lot more of the acid-forming minerals.
A study in the journal Plant Biotechnology reported that modern wheat breeding has indeed altered the protein composition of wheat gluten. This explains the rise in gluten sensitivities we're seeing. Personally, when I cut back on wheat, my energy levels soared, and my persistent bloating disappeared.
So let me give you the wheat story. The original wheat that God made is called Enkenhorn, or some call it just Enkhorn. And that original wheat had a very fragile protein or gluten structure. It is not sure when, but they estimate a couple of 1,000 years ago, Enkenhorn did a wild hybrid with a field grass and came up with the Emma strain of wheat. Its structure, its protein or gluten structure is not as fragile, but it's still fairly fragile. And in the 1950s, it was the Emma strain of wheat that was put through intensive crossbreeding, and it came up with the hybridised wheat that we know today. That hybridisation of the wheat created an incredibly complex gluten or protein structure. Today, we're looking at how the hybridisation process changed the gluten or the protein structure, and it's almost only a cast iron gut that can break down that very complex protein or gluten structure. That explains why so many people are gluten intolerant today. You look at the timeline. It was the 1950s that the wheat was hybridised. It was the 1970s that it went worldwide. So by the 1990s, every pasta, every pizza, every biscuit, cake, cookie, donut, cereal, bread, it's all made out of the hybridised wheat. This explains the gluten intolerance that we see today. The two most common symptoms of a gluten intolerance is brain fog and bloating. I meet so many people that have brain fog and bloating, and they almost think it's normal, or it can be blamed on age. Poor old age gets blamed for so many things. Caffeine. All your caffeine foods and drinks have an acid effect. And of course, caffeine usually comes hand in hand with the sugar, which certainly ups it. And remember our 2.6 Coca-Cola, that's a combination of the caffeine and the sugar.
Many people use caffeine as a morning fix, yet many are unaware of the acid it creates. I get it. I used to be a 3 cups a day coffee addict, but here's the truth. Caffeine foods and drinks have an acidifying effect. A study in the British Journal of Nutrition found that high coffee consumption was associated with increased urinary excretion of calcium, which can contribute to bone loss and increased acidity.
Did you know that Coca-Cola is called Coca-Cola because I think it was in the early part of the 20th century they put cocaine in it. And then they went over to caffeine, which is just as dangerous. Refined sugar, it's very acid forming.
Sugar is the next food on our list. Sugar is perhaps the most insidious acid former. While neutral in its raw state, it becomes highly acidic when metabolized. A study in the journal Cancer Research found that high sugar intake was associated with increased cancer risk, particularly for certain types like breast cancer. My personal observation is that when I cut sugar from my diet, my skin cleared up, and I lost those stubborn last 5 pounds. Food number 5 on our list is aged cheese.
Aged cheese, what's the blue in the blue vein cheese? The blue in the blue vein cheese is mould. So the only cheeses that don't sit under that category, the cheeses that have probably a pH of 7 would be your fresh. So that's your cottage, your ricotta. I'm not saying that they are okay because usually they come from cows who have not been fed right or have chemicals in them.
Cheese lovers, brace yourselves. Dairy products are considered acid-forming foods because of how our bodies process them. When we eat dairy, our body breaks it down, and this creates tiny amounts of acid. It's like when you add lemon juice to water, it makes the water a bit sour. Dairy has lots of protein and a mineral called phosphorus. When our body uses these, it makes small amounts of acid as a side effect. Also, some dairy products like yogurt already have a type of acid called lactic acid in them. Our body usually keeps everything balanced, but eating a lot of dairy might make things a tiny bit more acidic inside us. This doesn't mean dairy is bad for you. It just means it's good to eat different types of foods to keep everything in balance, just like eating different colors of fruits and vegetables. Next on our list is alcohol.
Alcohol is not a food, but it creates an acid environment in the body. Tobacco is not a food, but it also creates an acid environment in the body.
Every sip of alcohol creates an acidic environment in your body. A study in the journal Alcoholism, Clinical and Experimental Research found that chronic alcohol consumption disrupts the body's acid-base balance. When I stopped my weekly wine nights, my sleep improved dramatically.
Alcohol breaks down in the body to acetaldehyde, and acetaldehyde is a neurotoxin. We don't want a neurotoxin. A neurotoxin is a brain killer. There are 5 places you can be exposed to acetaldehyde. Yes, if someone consumes alcohol. Yes, if someone has a yeast problem and they're having a lot of fruit, it will break down to this. Cigarette smoke, car fumes give off acetaldehyde, and the last one is vinegar. We don't use vinegar here, we use lemon. Lemon is far superior.
Next on our list is tobacco. If you're still smoking, you're practically begging for cancer. Tobacco smoke is highly acidic, with a pH as low as 5.3. The American Cancer Society has linked smoking to increased risk for at least 12 types of cancer.
People die from alcohol-related diseases. Far more people die from tobacco-related diseases, and yet they're not banning tobacco or alcohol, are they?
Next on our list of acid-forming foods are certain grains, legumes and nuts.
All your other grains, other than the grains that sit on the alkaline side, all your other legumes, other than the lima, lentil and soy, and all your other nuts, other than the almond and Brazil, have an acid effect. To maintain the 6.5 environment, we need to be consuming 20% acid-forming foods and 80%, 70 to 80% alkaline-forming foods. And I'm sure you're not surprised to hear me say that the 20% should come from this section here. Yes, oatmeal is here. Yes, rice is here. They're not bad grains. We need a little acid. Yes, your chickpeas are here and your garbanzos, your black-eyed beans. One of the easiest ways to do it is eat more vegetables, eat more greens. Start pursuing the other grains.
Not all health foods are created equal. Many grains and legumes have an acidifying effect when metabolized. However, don't cut them out entirely. They're still nutritious. The key is balance. As part of having a balanced pH, there is another interesting factor to consider and think about fruit.
Now I've got a question mark with fruit too. Why have I got a question mark? If someone has a yeast presence in their body and they're eating a lot of fruit, the sugar in the fruit will feed the yeast. And as the yeast feeds on the sugars in the fruit, it gives off acetic acid, it gives off lactic acid, it gives off uric acid. So it basically is feathering its nest. So when a person has a yeast presence and they're eating a lot of fruit, can you see that they are feeding the problem? And they're creating the environment of 5.5 where yeast loves to live.
I've included the link to the next episode in the description. It features Dr. Barbara O'Neill discussing foods that can starve and eventually kill cancer cells. Make sure to watch it.